All right, let's talk about how you would go about pre-writing for the poetry question on your mock exam. Let me turn my pen on here. Okay, so when we're talking about pre-writing, obviously we got to focus in right here because that's the prompt and that's the heart of what we're looking for before we kind of jump in to the passage below. So, a few things to look for is I want to pick out, obviously, my context, who. So Rachel Harper is the poet. Read the poem carefully, then consider such elements as imagery, form, and tone. Write a well-organized essay in which you analyze the relationship between music and the speaker's complex memories of her family. So this right here, this is what needs to become my claim. What is that relationship between music and the speaker's family? And then these, imagery, form, and tone, are different options I can use to look for. So that said, as I go ahead and annotate below, I'm going to focus on imagery, form, and tone, particularly, because those are probably going to stand out more. The next thing is this right here. The title is The Myth of Music, so I kind of get that context from up here. But more importantly, we know that it's for her father. So her father is obviously going to play a huge role in this poem, and I kind of got to keep that in mind as I'm looking through it. So that said, let's dig in. Like I said, we're looking for things like imagery, form, and tone. Form is just talking about the structure, the order, how it's organized. But overall, we're going to be looking at this, the relationship between music and the speaker's complex memories of her family. So, let's start. If music can be passed on like brown eyes or a strong left hook, that's a simile. This melody is my inheritance, lineage traced through a title track. That's a really good comparison. So lineage traced through a title track, displayed on an album cover that you pin to the wall as art, oral history taught on a record player, the lessons sealed into the grooves like facts. This right here is a great example of imagery, using that comparison of lineage to music, talking about albums on the walls and things like that. This is the only myth I know. That's kind of a change in syntax right there, so there's a kind of break. I sit on the hardwood floors of a damp November, my brother dealing cards from an incomplete deck, and I don't realize that this moment is the definition of family, collective memory cut in rough textured tones, the voice of a horn so familiar I don't know I'm listening, don't know I'm saying, a child's improvisation of great steps or impressions, song without lyrics, can still be sung. So a few things. First of all, let's see over here. So these are jazz music. That's what the footnote tells me. There's obviously another kind of cut right here. And if we stop here, there's again imagery of her brother playing cards in the damp November. There's a lot of different things I can pull up. But there's also the voice of a horn. That's personification if we're talking about the device. But it's also kind of adding to the imagery that's being created in this moment. So this one, there's lots of examples of imagery. I think tone so far, especially this whole section, is very nostalgic. Talking about her brother and playing cards in the basement. Okay, in 6 months when my mother is 2,000 miles away, deciding if she wants to come home, I will have forgotten this moment, the security of her footsteps, the warmth of a radiator on my back, and you present in the sound of typing your own accompaniment, multiphonics disguised as chords in a distant room, speakers set on high to fill the whole house with your spirit, your call as a declaration of love. So first let's break it into the chunk. This first part we said the tone is nostalgic, but it definitely switches here when she talks about her mom deciding if she even wants to come home. So there, I think it switches to a tone of insecurity or longing, that she's longing for her mother to come back. So there's definitely a clear tone shift, and that's another one of the things they mentioned I could talk about. But up here in particular, she's talking about her father and how the sound of his typing was his own accompaniment. So there's the imagery again of the music, the speakers, and then how that relates to her father kind of being reassuring in that insecurity. So the last stanza, but the music will remain. That's a different sentence type. It's kind of abrupt and syntax is different. So there's definitely a shift, which we kind of already noted. The timeless notes of jazz, too personal to play out loud, stay locked in the rhythm of my childhood. Memories fading like the words of a lullaby, come to life in a saxophone's blow. They lie when they say music is universal. This is my song, the notes like fingerprints as delicate as breath, and I will share this air with anyone but you. I will not share this air with anyone but you, excuse me. So this is obviously Dad, because it's to her father, so you need to make that assumption that she's talking to him. Again, we have the use of comparison and simile. And rhythm, jazz, saxophone, those kind of musical diction or jargon is attached throughout to kind of build on this comparison we talked about earlier. So then, when we're talking about pre-writing, really my last step is to kind of pick out what I'm going to talk about and figure out this. So what is the relationship between music and the speaker's complex memories of her family? I think if I was to argue what the relationship is, I see that it's kind of a comfort, despite some difficult times. So like she talks about up here, her father was very reassuring, whereas down here, the music stops. There's really not much in terms of the musical comparison down here when talking about her mother. So I would say my claim is the poet, or I could say Harper, the poet aligns music as a comfort from childhood despite difficult memories. So this right here, that is my claim. That's the biggest thing, that Harper is aligning music as a comfort, especially during those childhood memories that are difficult. So then as far as like my main points, what I would talk about is obviously this imagery of the music throughout and how it's missing, particularly in this part. So the absence of the music imagery is probably what my first paragraph would be about. And then my second, I would talk about tonal shift throughout, how it went from very nostalgic and happy to insecure and longing for her mother. And then right here, it's very endearing in terms of her father. So I think in writing this essay, like I said, I'm going to talk about the imagery about music. So like what I said right down here first, and how there's an absence of it when talking about her mother, because I can tie that back to my claim. And then I'm going to talk about the tonal shift and how it shifts again when she's talking about her mother. So I hope that helps. That is how I would go about pre-writing my poetry prompt. Basically what I did is I took my time up here, analyzed the prompt, picked out what I needed for my claim, underlined the suggestions they had for devices, and then jumped into the passage down here and marked it up. And from there, we made this claim, which answers this up here, and then went through the passage and picked what devices were going to best create that.